Hi, everyone. This is Elsie Kerns, and it's Sunday night, and we just had to come to you. I asked Pam to come on because we have another trifecta weekend where we have a new moon, a solar eclipse, and of course, celebration of solstice. And so there's so much going on. I asked Pam to come on and talk about a number of things that are happening and continuing to happen over the next 6 months. And happily, she's going to do a webinar this Thursday, which is going to take us through July to December. But right now, Pam, I want to start out before we get into the bigger picture. Can you just explain that we have Mercury retrograde right now?
Sure. So most people have heard about Mercury retrograde. The retrograde motion is an optical illusion. It's just when the planets look like they're going backwards through the sky. It's an astronomical term, so it's actually a physical. I was going to say apparition, but that's not what it means. Optical illusion. It's just like when we pass a car on the freeway and we're going faster than that other car is while we're passing it, it looks like it's going backwards. It's just an optical illusion. But in astrology, we pay close attention to how everything looks from Earth. And so for a while, a planet looks like it's going backwards while it's going retrograde. And that changes how we experience the energy of that planet. Mercury is a planet that has to do with communication and networking and learning and teaching, and a little bit about the emails and any ways that we use our brains. And during a retrograde period, we're meant to be turning more inward and not using our conscious, rational brains quite as much. And so what we often find is during Mercury retrograde, circumstances kind of compel us to go inward. So something goes awry and we need to figure it out or rethink our steps. That's really what a Mercury retrograde period is meant to be about, is that we're reviewing where we've been, we're looking back over decisions we've made, or reviewing facts before we make a big new decision. So it's kind of a retread time. Let's go back and retread the tires before we go on the big journey. And so Mercury will be retrograde. Let's see, what retrograde this week on the 17th, and it will go direct again on July 12th. So, during that time, it's usually advised to take your time making decisions. It's not like you can't do anything, but when I had the worst kind of complications during a Mercury retrograde was when I felt like I had to make this decision. And that meant it was based more out of kind of an anxiety and a fear rather than peace and rational kind of consideration. And that's the only time I've really found the Mercury retrograde to be highly impactful, was when I went against the grain and forced a decision that really should have waited, or really what I should have done is done more research into how a certain process went before I launched. So that's just kind of standard advice while Mercury is retrograde. The other thing to think about with Mercury retrograde, I like to think of it as Alice through the looking glass, where everything is kind of weird and upside down a little bit. It's also, I like to think of it as if we're in a dream state. So when things go a little off during a day, to think about, if I had dreamt this, what would that dream have meant? Because I think the whole world of symbolism and meanings is more potent during the Mercury retrograde phase too.
Well, a lot to think about. Now we have this 3-stage solar and lunar eclipses. So can you explain what is the difference between the solar and the lunar?
Yes, exactly. So every month we get a new moon, and that's when the sun and moon reach the same degree of the zodiac. But every 6 months or so, that new moon actually becomes a solar eclipse. And it's just because with my hands here, you can see that they're both at the same degree of the zodiac, but they're not blocking each other. An eclipse happens when actually, a solar eclipse happens when actually the sun goes behind the moon. The moon is actually blocking the light of the sun from reaching the earth. So a solar eclipse is a new moon, but it's like a mega new moon. And, you know, you have your abundance checks that you talk about writing every new moon. And so people have this knowing of it being a time to initiate, the time to start something. And usually we think of, oh, well, the new moon is starting something for the next month. But with a solar eclipse, where that intention is taking us through the next 6 months until that next set of eclipses. And then the lunar eclipse is always a full moon. So we get a full moon every month again. The planets are actually opposed then. So sun and the moon are exactly opposite in the zodiac. But it's the positioning again that makes it a lunar eclipse instead of just a full moon. But as we know about full moons, emotions tend to be heightened. And it's also a time when we're meant to be seeing what's been hidden, because think of a full moon and how it's the brightest light in the sky at night when things are usually dark. And so it's actually bringing light to things that have been hidden, light to the unconscious. And that's one of the reasons that emotions are so big under full moon, because the unconscious is coming forward. And then a lunar eclipse is then like a mega full moon. Everything is bigger and not necessarily brighter because we have the blocking of the light, but the issues that come up, remember, we're taking care of the next 6 months instead of just a month-long period. So it's just makes everything a little bit bigger. And then, of course, I think you were going to ask about this. I think I wrote in the journal about this particular solar eclipse today being aligned with something called the Aries point, which is also called the world axis. So I think you mentioned that, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So the Aries point is 0 degrees of Aries. So we have the 360-degree zodiac. Every one of the signs is made up of 30 degrees. So they start at 0 degrees, go 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 30. And so the Aries point is 0 degrees of the sign of Aries. But then there are other check-in points, and these happen to be each one of the solstice and equinox moments. And each one of those beginnings of certain signs, so Aries and Cancer and Libra and Capricorn, the 0 degrees of those signs is called the Aries point, or we could call it the world axis. And it's just a very sensitive point of the zodiac. And they call it the world axis because the theory is, and it seems to occur, that more global type events happen when that world axis is stimulated in some way by an eclipse or a planetary alignment or something like that. So we would expect around the time of this solar eclipse, which happened last night, so the day before, so yesterday it happened at 0 degrees of Cancer. So the sun had already gone into Cancer. We'd already had the solstice, and then the eclipse occurred. So it just makes this time even more important. We have that kind of more global experience, which we're already in the midst of anyway. I mean, the COVID-19 experience is certainly affecting the entire world. And so, but this kind of even reinforces that more events will be occurring that draw us together, that impact a wide group of people. So does that explain that world axis a little bit?
Yes, it does. And we're having 3 eclipses together.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another, it's just such a big year. We usually get 2 eclipses in a row. So we get a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse. It's about every 5 years or so that we actually get 3 in a row. And this happens to be one of those years. So we had a lunar eclipse on, oh my gosh, I can't remember the lunar eclipse, which would have been 2 weeks ago. So mid-June, I can't remember the exact date. today is the solar eclipse, and then we have a second lunar eclipse that'll actually be on the 4th of July. So it's right on the sun in the US birth chart, which makes it significant for the country.
Now,
so we're sandwiched. We've got the lunar eclipse, big emotions, big reveals. We've got the solar eclipse, big new beginning. And then we've got another lunar eclipse of more things coming to the surface.
so how does this intersect with this major Pluto, Saturn situation that continues to reverberate this year, and particularly for the United States?
Yeah. So I think the impact, I'm trying to tie those two together, the 3 eclipses and then the huge things that are going on with the planets in general. It's almost just like a cosmic coincidence that this is all happening at the same time. It's the reinforcement of knowing that this is such an impactful year and such a huge moment in our evolutionary process. Because that's the other piece of eclipses. Eclipses, when you draw an astrology chart, they involve something called the nodes, the moon's nodes. And when nodes are activated, it's always a process of karmic resolution, letting go of the past, moving into a new future, something about healing, but oftentimes it does bring up some karmic issues to be resolved. And certainly we're seeing that as a big part of this whole Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto, Eris moment that we're dealing with this year. So we had Saturn and Pluto align last January. Now, that was a big event that kind of set the stage for all of this. And as we know, that that exact alignment was within a week or 10 days of when the first COVID-19 case was diagnosed in the US. We know now that the first cases in China came in at the end of 2019, that they were found at that point, which was when there was another eclipse. So, and now throughout this year, we've got this Jupiter-Pluto dance happening because Jupiter and Pluto actually align, come together in the sky 3 times. Happened back in early April, happens next weekend. I think it's the 29th. And then the last pass is in November. And so this is a whole big picture as well of lots of transformational energy. Jupiter exaggerates things. Pluto is the power of a transmutation, which is the changing from, it's kind of alchemical. It's changing from one form into another. And then we get the dwarf planet Eris involved too. And in mythology, Eris, the goddess was, she acted out of response to being ignored, disrespected, all of that. So of course, during this Eris time as well, we have so much of what's going on right now with protests about people who are not respected, who are not looked at as being as valuable as others. And so this is all wound into the energies of this year, which is really meant to shift our awareness. It's really meant to bring us into our hearts. It's a shame that catastrophes have to happen to bring us into our hearts, but we can't deny that that is what's happening. So many people protesting in the streets around here, at least, and making connections and trying to really come from their hearts. And if we think about the larger intentions of all of this, in my mind, it really is, designed to bring the divine feminine into balance with the divine masculine. So that means bringing the heart, balancing the heart and the mind. And we've been such a mind-oriented society and driven by all of that. And the mind is a great tool, but without the heart, it just can't make this world work in the way that it needs to work. So that might have been a tangent, but there's so much that's going on this year. And even today's eclipse, yesterday's eclipse which was in Cancer. Cancer is a feminine, nurturing sign. So to have that new moon solar eclipse, Aries point energy in that sign is another sense of a major new beginning. How do we go forward using this divine feminine in a more empowered way? And I think that's a lot of the energy behind all of what we're dealing with.
Pam, I'm so excited because this Thursday, you're going to do your webinar, which is going to cover July through December. And it's titled Transmutations. We really are totally transmuting. Everybody is changing. So tell us what we can expect on that. And I'm going to give everyone the link also.
Okay. Great. So yeah, the title is actually Transmutations and Rebirth. And when I was doing that, I was thinking, well, should it be rebirths? But transmutations had to be in plural. It was just the way it had to feel. So because so much change is going on, transmutation is, like I said, it's that alchemical process of shifting from one form into another. And so many things have to change and are changing on the way to a rebirth. So during the class, I'm going to give an overview. I'm going to start off talking about, these energies that I've just touched on a little bit here today and how they're manifesting. We're going to talk about this being the transmutation is actually the 11th stage of a spiritual process. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And the word rebirth is in the title because at the end of this year, we have a Jupiter-Saturn alignment. This happens every 20 years, but this is a very unique one. It happens in Aquarius, and I'll explain more about why it's unique in the class. But it is really the opportunity for a new beginning. So we think about the transmutations going on, preparing us for that rebirth. So I'm going to talk about the bigger picture, those bigger issues first. That's about the first half of the class. And then when you register for the class, you'll get some calendars that you can print out to take notes on. In the second half of the class, we actually go through all 6 months, not day by day, but week by week, and talk about the times when there are likely to be issues coming up and how to work with them, and when there are potentials for growth. And we'll certainly touch on we'll touch on the eclipse in July. We'll talk about some important alignments in August and September, and then October, November is big again, that last Jupiter-Pluto alignment, and then of course the December time frame as well. And we do have 2 more eclipses, end of November and in December, but just 2 this time instead of our huge group of 3 this year. So I do try to do my best to both use the astrology terms, but also explain it in ways that are understandable, because we have a wide range of people who attend these things. But I hope that everybody who comes gets something important that's going to help as we move forward into these next 6 months.
Well, I love that the calendars have those fireworks on them for days that are going to be a little bit challenging, and will be on Zoom. It'll be live, it'll be recorded for replay. So even if you can't make that day in time, Thursday, June the 25th, this coming Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. I think it's 5 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time and 6 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So we'd love to have you join us, and you'll again have that to listen to, take you through the next 6 months.
Great.
And Pam, I'm going to put the link for registration. Okay. And I'd also like you to talk a little bit about the fact that you also do personal readings. read somebody's chart on the call, but why don't you talk about some of the personal readings that they can contact you for?
Sure. Right. So, on the webinar, we are going to leave it open for general questions that would affect everybody, but I'm not able to answer individual questions about people's personal lives or personal charts. But I do offer personal sessions. You can go to my website, which is www.northpointastrology.com. And there's a personal readings page. You can read about what astrology sessions are like. If you've never had one before, it gives some ideas about the kinds of questions that people can bring to these sessions. But I always custom create every session for the individual. So whatever questions you want to bring forward, whether it's about current events or the past or your natal chart about, what am I here to do in the world, those kind of questions. I also do relationship readings and that kind of thing. And I just did a new baby reading, which is always really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a wide range. So if you want to learn more, please do visit my website and then send me an email. My email address is there on the website. Send me an email if you want to set something up or if you have any questions.
So I also want to mention that Pam has a weekly journal that comes out every Sunday afternoon. It's free. You can sign up for that as well. So Pam, thanks so much for joining us tonight. This is Elsie Kerns, your Chaos to Clarity coach. And if you have any questions about the webinar, how to join us, check on the links below. And we would love to see you this Thursday, June 25th, right on Zoom live. So Pam, any last words to help us navigate this next week until we get to hear more from you?
Well, just to know that we are in this space between eclipses, and it always feels like kind of an otherworldly place to be. And so to really respect that, and I know lots of us are kind of kept at home right now anyway, and maybe that doesn't give you a lot of space for alone time if you live with other people. But to really respect this as, even though we've just had a new moon, it's very much about some inner processing. And so allowing yourself that kind of time, and that also gives you space to breathe and to enjoy nature and to listen to some uplifting music and to maybe meditate. All of this that we've been talking about is really high energy, and our bodies are feeling it, our emotional bodies are feeling it, our mental bodies are feeling it. And so it's really an important time for some self-care and realizing that everybody's under this same pressure too.
Yes, everyone is struggling with this. And I'm going to also put information if you'd like to do an abundance session. We'll look at ways, there might be areas or 7 energy areas that we can look at and remove any blocks that you have so you can be abundant in health and relationship and love and financial freedom and whatever it is you need at this time. So once again, Pam Younghans, thank you.
Thanks, Elsie.
NorthPointAstrology.com. And I will put the link for the webinar this Thursday, Transmutations and Rebirth. Thanks, Pam.
Thank you, Elsie. Take care.
Right.